everyone, welcome back to our Nader Shah series where we're playing episode 5 today. So I have a few goals for the game.
Okay.
First is we want a couple of wonders in this episode. Definitely Forbidden City and Colosseum, and then maybe some of the other ones if we get to it. Judging by the last episode, we're not getting to it. I was watching it and I was like, can you please just click? Like I was gonna strangle myself through the screen. Like, can you please just like make decisions a little faster? The second goal is to sort of clean up this war here. I don't know if I want peace or if I want to sort of pillage and then get peace. We'll see how strong they come at us.
Yeah.
I did want this settler, but it's surrounded by units right now. The third goal, I don't know if I had a third goal.
Third goal is to have a good time.
Yeah, third goal is to have a good time. There we
Okay.
go. And so we thought about how we're going to structure the historical conversation in this episode, and we had an idea, right?
Yeah, we did. Now that we know that the civilization developers are watching,
They
listening.
are. I recently got a follow from the official account.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Somewhere around here.
I forgot. Maybe it's this way. I think it's that way.
Okay.
Yeah, that felt really good. It felt almost as good as getting into my PhD program. You know, I was just like, yes, I made it.
So we wanted to structure this episode today on the Safavid. And the way we wanted to think about it was, since we're hoping and assuming that Civ 7 is around the corner, we were thinking, if they were to add the Safavids in Civ 7, how would they do it? And who would be the leaders?
Yeah. And here's where we have our disagreements a little bit.
Yeah.
I believe the leader, as an architectural historian, oh my God, please don't kill Immortal. As an architectural historian, I believe it should be Shah Abbas, the
Okay.
founder of Isfahan. He moves the capital to Isfahan, and that's what we were talking about last episode. Naqsh Jahan is really through his initiative.
Whereas I'm approaching it more from the maybe historical perspective, literary perspective also, and I would vote for Shah Ismail, the founder of the Safavid dynasty, and really the one who gives it its particularly Shia character and its own kind of governmental character.
Right. Which, okay, I think let's let the debate begin.
Okay.
And let's start with the abilities. What would be
Right.
Shah Ismail's ability?
Well, Shah Ismail, was known as this charismatic guy. Everyone talks about how handsome he was. He had red hair. So he really was riding this wave of charismatic authority. And when he came to the stage, there was this kind of expectation that the 1500s would be the century of the Islamic millennium, the end of the world essentially, and that he would be the kind of harbinger of that. All throughout the Islamic world, there were people who were following his exploits, who were reading his messages in these texts that were called buyruks. Because of that, throughout the Islamic world, there were all these kind of, like rebellions, people wanting to follow him. And in the Ottoman case, Selim the Grim massacres them, unfortunately.
We talked about Selim the Grim a little bit, Yavuz Selim.
Yeah.
He's known for his massacres in Anatolia of people who are maybe aligning with Ismail, which
Yeah.
is sort of a claim that's made to make them.
It's a claim because some people may be aligning themselves in a theological sense, but not in a political sense.
Exactly.
But for Selim, they are traitors, essentially. So he massacres them in very brutal ways. Because of that, one of his abilities, I think, Shah Ismail's abilities, could be that when he converts a city, it has a high chance of flipping towards him. I think that would really capture the shock that Ismail represented to the Ottomans and other dynasties of that era.
Yeah, so the idea is that if you convert a city as Shah Ismail, you lower its loyalty.
Yeah, maybe like drastically lower its loyalty.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, and I think it's doable. I think they have sort of mechanics in the game that would work with that. Although, Civ 7 is probably going to be a different game.
Yeah, probably. And for a unique unit, what you could do maybe is something like the Qizilbash.
Yeah.
Qizilbash refers to the red hat that the followers of Ismail wore. So Qizil means red, Bash means head. And I guess Ismail was also a redhead, so that works.
Yeah.
But
The dynasty of redheads, could you imagine?
But the Qizilbash were his extremely devoted followers, and they would follow him as if he was this kind of coming of a new age. Unfortunately, they were defeated by Selim at the Battle of Chaldiran. And after that point, he kind of lost his mystique a little bit. But the Qizilbash would remain really important until actually the reign of Shah Abbas.
Right.
Maybe they could be like a military unit that also has that kind of missionary capability, so that you could send the Qizilbash to a city and then, you know, flip it or convert its loyalty. So it'd be something like that, like a defensive, offensive missionary.
Yeah, I think the Byzantines have something like that. I haven't played them, so I don't quite remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that would be really good. And I think it works really well with historical situation.
And then for unique building, I was thinking, you know, what could work for Shah Ismail? And I think maybe the Sufi shrine or the Shi'i shrine could work as a good option. Because the Safavids really develop a shrine culture. I mean, they adapt it to their symbolism of rule. For example, the shrine of the founder of the Safavid order, the Sufi order, Sheikh Safi, really is developed by Ismail and his successors as this kind of both spiritual spot, you know, the spot of pilgrimage and spot of benefaction, but also it's a spot of royal kingship, right? Royal ideology. The Safavid Shahs are buried at shrines, and they really develop shrines like the ones in Mashhad.
Yeah.
The shrine of Imam Reza.
Mashhad, our capital here.
Our capital there. They really expand that. They cover it in gold and make it very fancy.
And so we have, the Imam Reza shrine, which is a really significant one because it's on the edge of the empire, and there's a lot of back and forth between the Uzbeks, right?
Yeah, Uzbeks, later on the Afghans.
Yeah, and so it gets pillaged and looted a lot, but the Safavids managed to maintain it, and because it's such a significant site, they invest a lot into it. There's also a lot of shrines patroned by women for women. So there's the one in Qom for Fatima, which is like equally golden and a little over the top.
Pretty much all golden. But there's also, for example, smaller shrines, fountains, Imam Zadeh, which is like a tomb for a holy person. And all of these can be sponsored by women.
Yeah.
They can be reserved for women. So it's a very interesting shrine culture that developed.
And the shrine in Mashhad is actually also important for Shah Abbas, which is the leader I would have picked, because he does a really interesting barefooted pilgrimage from Isfahan to Mashhad.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that later.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. The Civ developers can run with these ideas, you know?
Okay, so between Shah Ismail and Shah Abbas, there is other kings.
Yeah.
Shah Tahmasp specifically.
Yeah.
And my friend actually works on the manuscript of Shah Tahmasp, which I believe we've shown already.
I think we have, yeah.
But I think it's a really interesting and unique piece. So he's also important, but, you know, neither of us picked him. So
yeah,
it's getting the shaft.
For Shah Tahmasp, yeah. Yeah, he was really in sort of ideological competition with Suleiman the Magnificent.
Yeah, and he's the one that sent the box of jewels that Suleiman then just buries.
Yeah, a lot of flexes.
Yeah, during this time.
The box of jewels. Even the Shahnameh itself was designed to be a flex. So like, oh wow, look what I can just give to you.
Yeah.
And it really is a magnificent piece of work. So yeah, the Shah Tahmasp, he actually reigns a pretty long time. Afterwards, you have Shah Ismail II, who reigns a very short time. And then you have Muhammad Khordabanda. We don't talk about him a lot, but he's there. But then we have Shah Abbas.
Yes, that is my pick.
Right.
So Shah Abbas is...
The Great.
The Great, yes. Like Alexander. So what... I can't ask you what makes Shah Abbas so great.
No.
I have to play the game. So Shah Abbas is definitely considered one of the greatest Safavid kings. Mostly because I think of his architectural interventions. So I think for his ability, now this one's a little different than what we've seen before. I think Shah Abbas should be able to move population from one city to another.
Interesting.
And I think that would work really well for the game, because sometimes you settle a new city and you just need that population, like for example here, to get your wonders going. And I think it would be a very useful ability in a game and something very unique.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. I think actually maybe in Civ 3 you could like settle a settler in a city and make it bigger.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting idea, because one of the things that is important about Shah Abbas's reign is that he moves the capital to Isfahan. In order to populate that capital, he kind of moves people from around the empire, including about 100,000 Armenian people from the city of Julfa, which is in, the northern Caucasus region, and he moves them all the way down to Isfahan and settles them in a settlement called New Julfa.
Yeah, in Isfahan.
In Isfahan.
And it's south of the bridge, so it's like its own little enclave.
Suburb, yeah. In that area, you have the Armenian community really establishes global mercantile networks that actually really support the Safavid economy. They also have really interesting architecture there.
Yeah.
And it still is a very vibrant Armenian community.
Yeah, there's this really important cathedral there, the Vank Cathedral, which has really interesting frescoes. It's really a unique site. Oh God, why is Jerusalem under siege? Oh no, I'm coming, Jerusalem.
This is the barbarians, I guess?
Yes,
wow.
barbarians. Okay, so I do want this card before I start building the Forbidden City. I think I want to get 2 temples, which I do have the money for 1, I think. So let me work on up until this for now.
Okay.
Ooh, we got the Colosseum.
Wow.
Nice. So we have been here before.
Yeah.
This one's already off our list. But we have nothing to say about it.
No.
No. Okay, so let's just close it. Okay, so now in this city, I want to eventually work on the Casa de Contrastación. Contrastación.
Okay.
Which will be soon. Until then, I also wanted to get my diplomatic quarter in Gordian because that'll help my trade routes.
Okay.
I'll build that right there. But also, I do want to make clear that like the displacement of an entire population is not something to take lightly. It's always very tragic to move people out of their homes. Even when the new settlement is, successful and prosperous, it's really important to keep in mind that a lot of tragedies happen along the way when you displace populations. So it's not something to take lightly, but it is a game, so everything is taken lightly. Okay, I have room for more. I have 14 population now. That is huge. I think maybe an industrial zone could be good in my capital over here, which means I'm going to want an aqueduct right next to it. Which I believe that was, my site for the Hermitage. So I'm going to put that somewhere else. Okay, let's see what's happening in Jerusalem. Okay, it doesn't look that bad. Oh no. I'm dead. I'm dead. That's my +4 guy. Oh no.
Maybe he can survive. Let's see.
Stupid. I'm stupid.
We should have thought.
I should have thought. Why did I say this is the no thinking episode? Okay, that guy survived. Oh, it survived. Yes.
He really is immortal.
Okay, you get out of there ASAP and you just do a few things. So in Pasargad, we discussed would be our first location for our first Paradeza. So let's do that.
Okay.
Now. Get the era score.
Nice.
Let's take a look at it. Now, what does this remind you of, Dr. Crow?
Well, that to me looks like a charbagh.
Yeah. So chahar meaning 4, bagh meaning garden, and that's sort of referring to the cross here, which creates 4 corners of the world. And so the idea of the charbagh maybe comes from ancient Persian ideas of the king of the 4 corners of the world, right?
Yeah, it refers to perhaps the 4 corners of the world in ancient Persian thought. It also maybe refers to the 4 rivers of paradise in Islamic thought. It probably refers to both at the same time. Shah Abbas is very well known for his charbagh, which he produces or builds in Isfahan. It's actually a little bit different in Isfahan because it's more like an avenue.
Right.
It's very long, but generally you'll see it, for example, in Mughal gardens. It's usually a square or a rectangle.
So the chahar bagh, meaning 4 gardens, is a part of a theme in Persian architecture where numbers are quite important. So remember the numbers 4, 8, and 40. Can you guess why? Hopefully you can guess
4,
why.
I'm going to guess charbagh.
Yeah.
8, I'm going to say maybe hash behesht. And 40, Chahal Sutun.
Yes. So hasht behisht means 8 paradises. Chahal Sutun means 40 columns. And those are both buildings that were created under the Safavids.
Yeah, so they refer to...
Ooh, we get El Cid. Nice.
Ooh, nice.
Not very useful, but I'll take it.
El Cid Meyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all these refer to sites in Isfahan, actually. But they also refer to typologies. So charbagh, as I mentioned, is that kind of ideal form of the Persian garden. Hashbehesht refers to the ideal form of the pavilion. And Shel Sutun refers to the ideal form of the colonnaded hall, or the talar.
Yeah, which we talked about here. You can kind of see this is the talar. And Shahel Sutun in Isfahan also has a similar outer portico that has many columns. That took me way too long to say. Where were you going? What are you doing here?
He was building the Paradisa.
Oh yeah, Paradisa, thank you.
Yeah.
We chopped a little bit and you come here. There we go. But I will say that Shahel Sutun in Isfahan does not have 40 columns.
And it's not just a piece of marketing.
Yeah.
The idea is that there are 20 columns in the building, then there's a pool in front of it, and you have 40 columns because of the reflections.
Yeah. Although technically I believe it only has 18 columns.
Yeah, so it is a bit of marketing, I guess.
But I think with the reflection, it somehow adds to 40 because the end pillars also count. Something like that.
Okay. For a unique building for Shah Abbas, what do you think would work?
Yes, so I think this one is also going to be an interesting one. The Maidan, which we talked about in the last episode, was really a government plaza. And Maidan really just means square. It's way more than that. So I think having a unique government plaza for Shah Abbas would work really well historically.
Yeah, that's interesting. Naqsh Jahan Square, as we talked about last episode, was this immense public space, but it was also used for spectacles of royal power, fireworks, polo games, great feasts. And so, one of the interesting things about Safavid kingship, when you compare it to the Ottomans, for instance, is that the Safavid kings were really accessible almost. They're really present. They would walk around the city. They participate in games with people. Whereas the Ottomans were a little bit more secluded. The Mughals were a bit more secluded. So the Safavids were, by comparison, much more about the kind of visibility of the royal body. And so squares like Naqsh Jahan were really about showcasing that.
And there's a bit of a debate on the kingship style of the Safavid kings. I think in the 1950s to 1970s, it was believed that the Safavids were derivative of Timurid style. And that comes from this sort of idea of accessibility, is a Central Asian concept of rulership, right? You have your lord or Khan that confers and discusses with the other Khans. That's why it's the Khan of Khans. But Sussan Babaie has written a really excellent book on this topic on how the kingship is quite different from the Central Asian style. Although it's accessible visually, one of the main differences is that that does not mean the king is equal or just a step above the other lords, right? The Safavid king is an intercessor. It is a charismatic leader way above the other lords.
Yeah, I mean, way above humanity, essentially, right?
Yeah.
That notion of that kind of charismatic leadership, although in Ismail's case it was a little bit tarnished, it continues into the Safavid later dynasties. There's that notion that we talked about of Abbas going barefoot on this pilgrimage to Mashhad is really about showing how the Safavid Shah is even above normal human piety, right? He is so pious that he performs these superhuman acts of piety.
Right, exactly. Well, actually, I can get an alliance with the Ottomans, going counter-historical here. Although they were not constantly at war.
Yeah, for sure. They were definitely competitors. They were very much engaged in, constant ideological competition, but not always at war.
And will you be my friend? No. That's okay. That's okay. Naqsh Jahan actually works really well with the government plaza already because you get adjacency to your commercial hubs and theater squares. But I think maybe if you doubled it, because Naqsh Jahan Square, like we talked about last time, has 4 portals that lead to the 4 sort of important ideological pillars of the empire. So what were those 4 again?
Yeah, so that includes the bazaar, the palace, the main Friday mosque, and the personal mosque of the king.
We showed the Friday mosque last time, and maybe this time we can show the... Oh, I just pulled my headset with my foot. And maybe today we can show the Ali Khapu portal and talk a little bit about the palace.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Ali Khapu and Baba Ali mean the same thing. Baba Ali is the Ottoman kind of governmental gate, and Ali Khapu is the Safavid one. But The Safavid one is in Turkish and the Ottoman one is in Persian.
It's always one of my favorite little fun facts.
Yeah.
So this one doesn't help us anymore. So let's get some builders here. Okay, maybe one here. Oh, that's a settler. Oh, I forgot to buy all my settlers. Oh no. Yeah, I totally forgot to buy my settlers. Great. Stupid.
No.
Dumb.
No thinking this game.
Yeah, I definitely proved that one. And actually the palace, I will never forget this because 10 minutes before my oral exams, which is the exam that moves you from PhD student into a PhD candidate, I learned that the talar, so the sort of portico, was built not by Shah Abbas. And I had no idea until when I was reviewing my notes 10 minutes before my exam. And I was just like, if I messed that up during my exam, I would have failed. I think my professor would have failed me because that's,
pretty critical.
It's pretty critical and it's, her area of expertise.
Yeah.
And it would have just been super embarrassing. So that was built later, but it's still a very significant symbol of kingship because it's all about that visibility again.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, really. The Ottoman, if you go to Topkapi Palace, you can see the Sultan is behind a screen. But in the Safavid case, he's very much out in the open, right? It's about the visibility of the king. And one thing that's interesting to talk about is when you think about cities like Isfahan, they're really sort of dominated by the imperial vision, right? The imperial ideology. And there was a recent book by Kathryn Babayan, which is really interesting because it flipped that around and it was talking about how that vision is subverted or how the hierarchy of spaces in the city is subverted. So she's looking at essentially erotic literature from Isfahan and how the geography of the city in that literature is totally different from the geography that we kind of imagine from that top-down view.
When I was reading Kathryn Babayan's book for my orals, I was like, I want to write a book like this. It was so good. But then I read in the acknowledgements, it took her 30 years to gather all of the stuff. And I was like, you know what, never mind. Yeah. Maybe when I'm, established and not just a PhD candidate, I don't need my thesis to be like that.
I don't want to write this for 30 years. Yeah. And then maybe for the unique unit for Shah Abbas, one of the things that he does, and this is interesting, this connection between my ideal ruler and your ideal ruler, is that Shah Abbas gets very tired of the Qizilbash. So he replaces the Qizilbash as the kind of main fighting force of the state with gholams, right? With slave soldiers, not quite in the same way that the Ottomans used the Janissaries or the Mamluks were the Mamluks, but in a similar kind of form. They become, as in the case of the Ottomans, a kind of very important power broker within the state as well. So that could be a unique unit maybe.
And the Ghulam, again, are another slave soldier unit. So that would make it the Mamluks, the Janissaries, and the Ghulams.
Yeah.
Which would be a really interesting...
who would win?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, so again, another controversial historical thing to make into a game, but here we are.
Yes. Now, you may be wondering why we often talk about Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals together. And this is because they were sort of put together as a typology called the Gunpowder Empires by who else? Marshall Hodgson, the guy who made Persianates, the guy who wrote all these terms. He created the term.
Love terms.
Gunpowder empires. The idea being that they are empires that arise and come to power through the adaptation of gunpowder weapons. I think this term is still used. It's maybe a little bit old-fashioned. I think no one would probably say that I work on the gunpowder empires nowadays. It's sort of reducing, as we talked about, all the differences that we mentioned in terms of Safavid governance, in terms of the way that they are practicing warfare, practicing kingship, their aesthetics. It kind of reduces it just to like one military technology, which seems kind of reductive. Yeah. But obviously they do share a lot. They are in constant connection. Artists will move from Istanbul to Tabriz to Isfahan to Delhi. It's not like they're separate. And I think we really benefit from putting them in comparison. Just maybe gunpowder is not the frame of reference to think about it.
I mean, I think now we just call them the early modern Muslim empires.
Yeah, exactly. Early modern empires. Some people always say, for example, the Millennial empires, because again, they're thinking about kingship in terms of the Islamic millennium. Universal empires are sometimes used also because that also includes the Habsburgs, the Russians, the Chinese.
Yeah, I think Universal is a good one. That's the one we sort of discussed in our Ottoman series.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got the Casa de Contrastación. I need to learn Spanish. Let's get Nader, and then we'll go towards flight.
Okay.
That'll give us something to sell because right now no one wants my iron.
What's my iron? Yeah.
It's okay.
The irony.
Stop. Oh, good. And we got 2 temples.
Another aspect of the competition between the Mughals, Ottomans, and Safavids was their patronage of occult science. It's an area of research that's really developed in the past 10 years, I would say. Because one of the things that they want to do is talk about occult science, things like astrology, lettrism, which is when you calculate things from the numerical values of letters, geomancy, which is when you are creating random numbers by throwing earth, and
Wait, what do you mean?
so in order to it's very hard actually to make random numbers. So one of the ways you can do it is you have a kind of chart and you throw earth and it produces random patterns that you can use to produce random numbers that you can then use in your calculations. So geomancy is one.
I don't think I understood that. Does anyone else understand that? What?
Because the idea is...
What are you talking about?
So if you are trying to create something that is a numerical sequence that is not just a product of your own imagination,
Okay.
but has some kind of connection to the workings of the universe,
Okay.
you want to create random numbers, right? But if you just say, oh, I'm going to make random numbers, 2, 9, 8, it doesn't really work like that because
You're not actually making random
they're not
numbers?
actually random. You're always going to say 7 probably. I mean, most people will say 7. So
is that how the magic trick works?
yeah,
Okay.
most people choose the same numbers.
What?
So it's not actually random. So there's different ways of making random numbers. Geomancy is one. And yeah, you throw earth and it produces these patterns that you can then deduce numbers from. And that can tell you something about the future, about what is going to be most auspicious, things like that.
Okay, so here we go. We can finally start on this wonder I have been waiting for a while to do now. I've never built it before, so that's why I was really excited for it.
Nice.
And it's 25 turns away. I think we can speed it up with some builders, but I don't have the builder card. And I think I'm gonna go settle here and then maybe settle here. Okay, let's see if we can actually get an alliance with Portugal. Finally, they want to be my friends.
Wow.
I think this could be the episode to talk about Portugal.
That's true.
Why did
yeah.
we include Portugal? Some people may be wondering.
The Safavids, are mostly well known as a land empire, but during this time, the Portuguese are really expanding throughout the Indian Ocean. Another recent field that has really blossomed in the past 10, 20 years has been Indian Ocean studies.
Which is, I love it. It's great stuff.
For the Spanish and Portuguese, North America was kind of a sideshow. What they really wanted, of course, as we know, was a route to Asia. And so the Indian Ocean becomes really that sphere of competition. But unlike the Atlantic, it's a sphere of competition in which the Safavids, in which the Ottomans are playing a key role.
Okay, what does this mean? Does this mean Gandhi likes me or doesn't like me? I have a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh, how are we doing on Era Score? I was not paying attention to Era Score. I can't.
Quite a bit, yeah.
This game, I can't help it. It's just gonna be an amazing game. I just really want to pillage. They won't let me. They're so strong. Another great person here, Piero de Bardi. Who's that?
I don't know.
Did I finally put in that card? Okay, I finally put in that card. Let's start our Forbidden City here.
Nice. So what's interesting is that in this game, we are allies with the Portuguese and fighting the English. But in real life, Safavids were allied with the English and fighting the Portuguese.
Yeah.
There's a very famous manuscript about the battle for Hormuz. Safavid and English combined fight the Portuguese to capture that island.
And Hormuz is a very unique and beautiful island in the Persian Gulf.
But in order to kind of dampen the risk from Hormuz, Shah Abbas actually deports the population again to the mainland and founds a new city, Bandar Abbas.
Yeah, meaning Port of Abbas.
Yeah.
Named it after himself.
Yeah, which is a very interesting city today as well. The Portuguese, because they were so present, their ambassadors were so present, their merchants were so present at the Safavid court. Portuguese youths, Portuguese figures, actually are kind of a motif of late Safavid art. One of the most famous illustrators, most famous painters of that era is Reza Abbasi. He was well known for creating albums of basically beautiful young people, right? And one of the most common depictions of there are Portuguese youth.
And I think if you don't put Behzad in the game, Reza Abbasi is usually the second choice.
Yeah, I
he's
think
very
so.
famous and well known for his miniature paintings.
Yeah, his miniature paintings are very sort of clear because they're more portrait-like, right? So because of that, I think they were more collectible by Orientalists compared to the ones by Behzad, where they're usually part of a narrative.
And speaking of Safavid art, which maybe this doesn't actually relate, Jehez Sutun, which is a Safavid building, has murals from a later period. One of those is of Chaldiran, the battle between Selim and Ismail. And the other one is of Nader Shah.
Yeah, so interestingly, in addition to these book paintings, we also have a flourishing tradition of mural painting. And in certain places, like for example in the bridges of Isfahan, they would be decorated with scenes of feasting, of pleasurable activities, of youths again.
Yeah, and also the bridges of Isfahan are one of my favorite topics. They are really joyous spaces. When the waters of Zayan Derud come in, people will gather under there and sing and dance. Unfortunately, that's happening less and less because, again, there's a lot of neglect of the environment in Iran right now. So that's really something that's really tragic, actually. But these bridges are a remander of how important the connection between the nature and the city is. Speaking of which, I'm trying to chop everything out in Mashhad. I can't even chop that, it's too far.
But Jehez Sutun is interesting. It's a later structure, so it's actually built by Abbas II. But it has a mural program which includes those scenes of feasting, but also includes scenes of the Safavid engagement with their neighbors. So it has the Battle of Chaldiran. It has the reception of the Mughal Emperor Humayun when he was an exile at the Safavid court. And later on, they add on a painting of Nader Shah. So Nader Shah comes towards the end of the Safavid period. The later Safavid kings are essentially figureheads. The real power is held by the Hotakis, who are an Afghan dynasty. And Nader Shah begins as a general in their service, but he very rapidly sort of acquires power. In 1726, he captures Mashhad and makes that his capital. In 1736, during that time, he's vaguely in the service of a Safavid Shah, but actually he's in control. In 1736, he finally declares, no, I'm the Shah. And so the question is, why did they collapse? Why so much sooner? Shah Abbas and Shah Ismail really were more dependent on different power brokers in their state than the Ottoman Padishahs or the Mughal emperors. The Safavid state was never as centralized as the Ottoman state became, for instance. It had a much more reliance upon, for example, nomadic levies, on support from the ulama as a class. So the Safavids come apart in the same way that a lot of Persian empires or empires centered in Iran come apart, which is that they have invasions from the east, from Central Asia, from Afghanistan. These invaders present the power brokers within the state with a chance to gain an edge over their competitors within the state. Nader Shah also is part of that, right? He is, at that point, a counterpoint to the Hotakis, right? And they themselves were a counterpoint to the Safavids. So in that sense, it's not really a collapse in that sort of catastrophic way, right? And we see so many continuities between the late Safavid period, Nader Shah, and then later on with the Zand and with the Qajars.
I finally changed the builder carts, and now it's time to buy some builders. And we did find Nader in the city, so I put the builder cart in so we can purchase it now. And this war with England is really just going nowhere.
Yeah, it's really dragging on.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna back out now. Maybe redirect my troops to Plymouth, which has flipped, but is not flipping to me for some reason. Maybe if I settle the city. I think to end this episode, I am going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to make peace with England. They don't deserve it, and they're not going to give me anything for it. But I think that's a good way to end this episode.
I think so, yeah.
And in the next one, we'll pick up where we left off and talk about Nader Shah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
See you next time. Make sure to leave a like or a comment below.
Thanks, everyone.